So the SNAP cuts are happening at a time that food pantries are strained already. And here is another important number. Over 4,600 retailers are approved to accept EBT cards. It's not just Arizona families and food banks that will be hurt. The economy in Arizona is going to take a huge hit without SNAP funding. Arizona small businesses that rely on EBT customers are rightfully worried about the impact to their livelihoods. Data has shown that in a weak economy, $1 of SNAP benefits increases economic activity because all of this money goes back into the economy at grocery stores and other retailers that can accept and do accept SNAP. So this suspension of benefits doesn't just take food off of families' tables. It sucks a huge amount of money out of Arizona's economy, and it hurts everyone along the food supply chain, from farmers to processors and distributors to the thousands of Arizona retailers that accept EBT payments. This is even more harmful in Trump's struggling economy now. But this cruelty is totally and completely unnecessary. The USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture, does appear to have at least $5 billion and perhaps more in SNAP contingency reserve funds that Congress appropriated for emergency situations just like this one. In fact, for several years, including under the first Trump administration, the USDA repeatedly acknowledged that SNAP contingency funds were available for paying benefits. And USDA may have access to other sources of funds that can be lawfully shifted. They should use that funding to provide November SNAP benefits immediately. The people who rely on SNAP are low-income families, seniors, and young kids. In fact, 40% of SNAP funding in Arizona goes to feeding children. 1 in 4 kids in Arizona receives SNAP benefits. 1 in 4 children in our state are about to lose their source of food on November 1st. The Trump administration is intentionally hurting folks who need help the most, and they are using actual lives as a bargaining chip in a fight over whether health care premiums should skyrocket. That is why we are suing. The Trump administration can and should continue to provide SNAP benefits. I will not stand by as Arizona families go hungry. Arizonans should not ever be used as a bargaining chip while Donald Trump plays politics. Yanking away low-income grocery support while Trump's tariffs make household goods even more expensive is just cruel. It's especially cruel to do this in November, the month of Thanksgiving, of course, when our forefathers came together to celebrate the bounty of the harvest being shared among all Americans. That is the opposite of what the president is doing by cutting off grocery access for hundreds of thousands of Arizonans. We have shown, as the Democratic Attorneys General, that we can successfully stop the president when he breaks the law and harms our states. We stopped the gutting of AmeriCorps. We are blocking the cuts to education and public health, and we are fighting against his illegal tariffs. And I feel confident that the law is on our side as we try yet again to protect the American people from the war that is being waged against them by the Trump administration. And now I'd be happy to take any questions.
Let's start off with the laws on our side. I realize the Chevron defense is gone, but why shouldn't a judge accept the findings of an agency that this contingency money was meant for things like disasters and things where there was already an appropriation? They're saying without an appropriation that you cannot spend this, and that this is for natural disasters and everything else.
Because the agency is now lying, and the Trump administration is flat out lying. The agency itself put out multiple memos saying that this contingency funding was meant for and could be used in this kind of a situation where a shutdown is occurring and we needed to continue to provide SNAP benefits to families and children. So, these contingency funds have been used, Howard, in the past for just this type of situation in the middle of a shutdown to make sure that our families don't go hungry. This administration changed its tune, I think, within the scope of a month. So it's head spinning the way they're lying. That is why I think a federal court will find in our favor. Yes.
So we're just 4 days away from November, and ultimately I know you amongst 26 other states joined this lawsuit. But what does this mean for SNAP recipients? I mean, this is not a direct solution. It's probably going to take some time. So what does this mean for the people who are actually struggling?
It's a great question, and it's been weighing on me for since we got this crazy memo from the Trump administration on Friday, or directive. First thing I would say is I am hopeful that, obviously we're getting into court today. I am hopeful that we will have a federal judge who will take this up quickly. We have had situations where judges have taken things up within 24 to 48 hours, but you're also right, there are issues in the bureaucracy around SNAP that makes it difficult to just sort of like quickly get it jump started again. So we are facing a situation on November 1st that is potentially cataclysmic for our state. We are facing, because of the cruelty of this administration, a scenario in which families are going to go to the grocery store, walk up to their clerk, and hand that clerk an empty EBT card and not be able to get their groceries that they get every week. And then they are going to be faced with the horrible question of what to do to feed their babies. That is what we're talking about here. This is not some esoteric bureaucratic issue. This is probably the most important lawsuit that I have filed because it directly impacts the people of our state. And so our food banks are going to come under tremendous duress probably in the next week or so. I don't know I don't believe they'll be able to handle this. As a state, we need to be doing everything that we can do in addition to this lawsuit to get ready for that tsunami of cruelty and chaos that is coming at our families in just a few days. And I have communicated that to the governor, and I am communicating that right now to the Republicans in the legislature. Get off your butts, get into a special session, and use some of that rainy day fund to solve this crisis. Somebody needs to do something. I'm doing my part, but if these Republicans in the legislature would indicate that they were willing to come into a special session and solve this, we could get this solved tomorrow.
Is the governor receptive to calling a special session to get the lawmakers in to use that rainy day fund?
I don't know yet. We texted this morning, and you know, I do know that they are working on coming up with some solutions, hopefully in the next couple of days. But I certainly think that, I mean, this is my opinion as the Attorney General, that they could call a special session and come up with at least some funding for the month of November, to bridge to the gap and hopefully get to a point where Congress will come to its senses and solve this problem permanently.
You're making a lot of blame here on the Trump administration. I can make an equal argument that the Democrats in Congress, who have always agreed to continuing resolutions before, gives them some time to work things out, could have done that this time and said, we'll work out the stuff with the ACA later. So why isn't it the fault that maybe Chuck Schumer and Ruben Gallego and Senator Kelly got outplayed? Why isn't it their fault for sticking and saying, we're going to hold the entire place hostage until we get our way?
So, because if they don't do what they're doing, Donald Trump and the Republicans will allow the ACA program to fall apart. And I would add that this is an administration that has been willing to lie in the past about funding the government, and then they go in and they do pocket rescissions that are also violative of law. So if, you know, I think that Mark Kelly, Ruben Gallego, and the Democrats in Congress are doing what they have to do. But I would go back to the fact that we have this $5 billion plus fund that Congress appropriated for this very purpose, which is to keep the SNAP benefits flowing even in the case of a shutdown. We have had shutdowns in the past, and we have always used this contingency fund to address those shutdown deficiencies. So there is absolutely no reason for the president to not allow those funds to be used. And in fact, as I said earlier, they were planning to allow them to be used. They had sent out communications saying, and memos that saying, this is the policy, that we use this contingency fund to fund these SNAP benefits in the case of a shutdown. So it makes no sense. It's clearly arbitrary and capricious, clearly violates the APA, and we're going to be making those arguments in court, Stacey.
Can I ask you about, sort of to Howie's point about our U.S. senators? I got an email from a reader this morning about the initial version of our story on this lawsuit. Her name is Andrea. She says that you should be suing the senators for, to quote her, not doing their basic job to keep government open. We've sort of already talked about that, but I wonder if you have talked to the senators about taking the votes to keep the government open so we're not in this situation.
Look, the person who's not doing his basic job of keeping the government, let's remember, Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. Okay? I'll repeat that. Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. The blame for this shutdown falls squarely at their feet. Donald Trump refuses to negotiate with House and Senate Democrats. The members of Congress aren't even working. We have a Speaker of the House who won't even swear in Adelita Grijalva. God knows why that is. So I just reject the whole premise of laying this at the feet of the minority party in the House and the Senate. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Wait a second here. You're playing a little fast and loose with the facts. As a student
Not really.
Yes. As a student of government, you know it takes 60 votes. So to say that the Republicans are in control of the Senate when the Democrats have automatic veto power is playing a little fast and loose with the facts.
Not at all. The House refuses to negotiate. The Senate refuses to negotiate with Democrats. It is completely reasonable, in fact, absolutely necessary, for House and Senate Democrats to stand up for the ACA. We have tens of millions of Americans who are about to see their ACA premiums skyrocket in just a few weeks, I think. That is totally unacceptable. So now we are in a situation in which the Trump administration refuses to use the contingency funding for SNAP benefits and is going to deprive Arizonans of food that they need. And they're going to allow premiums to skyrocket inside the ACA. Anybody think that's a good idea? I don't think so. And again, Republicans are in charge of all three branches of government.
But the premium subsidies were going to expire anyway. I mean.
No, Congress doesn't have to let that happen.
Well, they don't have
What?
to let that happen.
I mean,
that's
you
so
act
much.
as if this is a fait accompli. It is absolutely not, and it should not be. I mean, you know, whose side are they on? Whose side are these people on? We have Americans who are going to lose their health insurance. Millions of Americans are going to lose their health insurance because they can't afford it anymore because their premiums are doubling. And now we have millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans, 900,000 Arizonans who are going to lose their SNAP benefits, their food on their table, who are going to be lining up outside of our food banks. I mean, we're talking about a potentially cataclysmic situation here, friends. Cataclysmic, of proportions that the state of Arizona has never seen before. And it's totally man-made. Indeed, it's totally made by one man who could solve this by doing what the USDA said it was supposed to do by releasing these contingency funds and negotiating with Democrats the way we used to do. You know, let's be a little bit bipartisan here. Let's negotiate. Let them get back together and work for the American people. And let's not forget that it is independents, Republicans, and Democrats who are going to be losing these SNAP benefits. Many of whom live in rural Republican Arizona. And those are the people who are going to be hurt the most, Stacey.
To that point, did the Coalition of Attorneys General reach out to any Republican-led states on this one?
Sure. I mean, sure. And we also have a couple of states that have Republican AGs but Democratic governors. Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and Kansas. But their governors, so the Kansas governor joined, the Pennsylvania governor joined, but the AGs wouldn't join. So it was incumbent upon the governors then to try to join, and then Kansas, Pennsylvania, and what's the third one am I missing? There's a third. Kentucky. Yeah. So Kentucky is a Democratic governor who wants to protect his constituents. I mean, keep in mind, so these lawsuits pursuant to the CASA case, the Trump v. CASA case, are now basically can only cover the plaintiff states, the states that actually filed the lawsuit. So, you know, when we win, we will be covering the people of Arizona and all the other states that joined this lawsuit, plus the people of the states that have Democratic governors but Republican AGs who refuse to join.
But that's why I'm asking the question. So on an issue with such broad impact as this, did the Democratic AGs or Democratic governors reach out to their Republican counterparts to have them included in the lawsuit?
Yeah, I can contact them. I can find out for you. They know we're doing these lawsuits. I mean, they know we're doing these lawsuits. They're fully aware of them, Stacey. And we welcome their involvement. We welcome them protecting their own. In fact, I mean, in a way that's I don't want to criticize your question, but they could bring their own lawsuit. They have lawyers, they have AGs, they can protect their own citizens, but they choose not to. They choose to leave millions of their own residents without protection, without food on the table in November. Why? Because they're too afraid of Donald Trump. That's why they're doing this. They have AGs, Stacy. They have lots of smart lawyers. They know this is going on. Even if they didn't want to join the Democratic AGs, they can file their own lawsuits against Donald Trump. But they're not going to do that, are they? They're not going to do that because they're afraid of him. Because he's a dictator, and he will punish them, and he will end their political careers. And so instead of standing up for people who need food on their tables, they are more interested in protecting their own political careers. That is what's going on in this country right now. But that is not what's going on in the state of Arizona, and we're going to stand up for the people of this state, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure that they still have food on their tables in the month of November and when Thanksgiving hits. Yes, sorry, Wayne. I mean, it was the Stacey Howie story for the show for like.
First time you've criticized one of my questions.
For the record, the only time. But yes.
Yeah, I just want to go back to the timeline. Obviously we talked about how this is such, the deadlines here are really important. The lawsuit references the October 10th letter quite a bit.
Yeah.
Why did it take so long to get a lawsuit filed after that one? Can you kind of explain?
Well, because the October 10th letter, they weren't saying that they were going to withhold the funds. I mean, there were several weeks there where it was not clear. It was a strange letter, but they were not being clear that they were going to withhold the funds. In fact, given the history of this, of SNAP benefits and the contingency fund, it's certainly reasonable to believe that they were going to, follow past practice and continue to use contingency funding. But then we got this crazy directive and memo on Friday night. I think it was late Friday night, where they came back and said, you're not getting your November SNAP benefits. So start planning for that, states. And then I think it's in the lawsuit, it is in the lawsuit, but I think it's important to remember that the states are still required pursuant to that and pursuant to law to administer the SNAP program, even though there's no money for the SNAP program. So we are required to continue to sign people up, even for a program that doesn't have money, because Donald Trump won't release the money. And so there are costs related to all of that as well, to the states. Yes.
I know you said you're doing your part. You said there should be a special session. Do you think Arizona is doing its part to protect, the 900,000 people here on SNAP benefits?
I mean, I have hope that we will, at the end of the day, do everything that we can. We're not right now, no. I think I'm underwhelmed by what we're doing. I think we are hopefully going to win this lawsuit. But look, there are other states that are calling out the National Guard to help with food banks. There are other states that are moving money around, including emergency funding. There are others. I don't know if any other states are calling a special session, but it's certainly something on the table. Again, it would be nice for Republicans to say that they would be willing to address this issue using our $1.6 billion rainy day fund. If this is not a rainy day, I'm not real sure what is. So.
Calling out the National Guard. We have a governor who can do that. Are you suggesting that this governor call out the National Guard?
If the food banks could use it, if the food banks made it clear that that would be helpful, yes, I think that the National Guard should be utilized. This would be an actual appropriate use of the National Guard, in contrast to what is happening in Chicago and Portland and Los Angeles, where the president has tried to federalize the National Guard to chase after landscapers and dishwashers and pick up trash in Washington, D.C. This would be an appropriate use of the National Guard if our food banks end up needing their help and there is this crisis that I think is looming on November 1st or 2nd. Yes.
Goes back to some of the previous questions we've heard, but just to be specific, could Governor Hobbs be doing more about this? She told reporters in the last few days that Arizona doesn't have funds to help with this. She pretty much said that flat out, and said that the state is going to have to rely on its food bank networks. But as you said, that might not work.
Look, I mean, I think I will say, our staff has been in contact with her staff. I've been texting with her. I think that they are looking at creative solutions right now. And I do disagree that we don't have the money. We have $1.6 billion in a rainy day fund. If Republicans worked with this Democratic governor to tap into that rainy day fund, yes, we could solve this problem in November and ride through it. Yes.
Follow-up question, I think, to the timeline about that. So that October 10th memo did instruct states not to send the files. Can you talk a little bit about just why did it take so long to get clarity from the federal government that they were indeed not going to send a later memo telling people to go ahead and send files?
I don't know. I mean, this administration has been really chaotic and really just all over the place. So I don't know why they were unclear. I mean, they've as I said, they had other memos in place and other communications that said this is still our policy to use the contingency funding. So I really, except to say that this is a chaotic and cruel administration, and they have left us in a position now, all of the states, of having to take last minute efforts to try to solve the problem. Yeah, I think you'd have to ask them about that. Yes. But they probably won't talk to you, I'm sure.
You said this would be a great time to use the rainy day fund. I know the state expects a bunch more costs to have to pick up for the Republicans' cuts in the future couple of years to Medicaid and SNAP. So is now a good time to
Yeah.
to use that money?
It's a fair question, but I think what I'm suggesting is just covering the month of November. And obviously this shutdown, God forbid, could go beyond November, but I think that that would not eat that much into the rainy day fund. And so yeah, if this thing went on for 6 months or for a year, it would probably chew through the rainy day fund. But for 1 month, to make sure that people can feed their families, to make sure that half the families in Apache and Navajo County can eat, yes, I think that using some of the rainy day fund is totally reasonable. But
We're just kicking the can down. Look, you've seen what's happening in
well,
Washington.
give
We didn't
me
think we'd be in
give me
28
time.
days.
Using that rainy day fund would give me also time to litigate this in the courts. Obviously, hopefully, I'm hoping to get it done in a week at 2 tops. But if we don't, it would buy me some time to litigate this and win this lawsuit and get this insanity stopped.
In previous actions you've taken about funding questions like this, when you have gotten a decision from the courts, has that money actually gotten released to states?
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, the education funding. So we sued Trump over their attempts to stop $132 million from coming to Arizona. We won, and that money came to our schools. We stopped him from destroying AmeriCorps. I'm going to be spending some time this afternoon with an AmeriCorps volunteer. We stopped Trump from doing the federal funding freeze. That saved Arizona about $1 billion. So when you add the total value of all of the lawsuits that we've filed, I think this is our 29th, the value is $1.5 billion. We have saved Arizona $1.5 billion with these lawsuits. And that number will go up obviously, when we win this lawsuit. So yeah, it's very much winning the lawsuit means we save money and preserve money for Arizona, but those Republican states that are not joining these lawsuits are getting walloped because they are losing the funding and will be terribly harmed if they don't join this lawsuit on SNAP.
The administration said that states wouldn't be reimbursed if they tried to cover SNAP themselves for November. Does that raise any legal questions for you in terms of, if Arizona were to take some steps to try to cover that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would duke that out in the litigation, certainly, but the most important thing is to make sure that families don't go hungry, that kids eat, that veterans are not deprived of food, people who fought and sacrificed for this country. That is my number one priority, and then we'll work everything else out after the fact.
Couple more.
One or two more?
I think we've beaten you to death.
I know. Are you bored of me now? Okay.
I do actually have, just like logistically, are you anticipating some argument from the court that people need to stop receiving the benefits before this lawsuit has standing? The question being, why not file it November 1st when the money doesn't come in?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't anticipate that. Also, there are other harms that are described in the lawsuit that are immediate. So I think we'll be okay on standing grounds. Yeah.
Well, that raises the other half of the standing question.
I mean, I would hope that the judge doesn't take that view, but I mean, November 1st is right around the corner. So we will, if that's the standing issue, we'll have it, unfortunately, really quickly.
Well, but that raises the other half of the question, and you've seen these cases where judges have said, you don't have standing to sue on behalf of certain individuals. You need individual plaintiffs in there, people who are losing or about to lose, for you to get in court. Otherwise, they say, what's the state's loss here? There's no loss to the state.
Oh, I think we describe plenty of loss to the state, including the fact that we have this duty to provide under the law SNAP benefits. We have administrative costs that we are going to incur. We may have to backfill this funding, and we have 4,000 businesses that are going to be harmed. Our economy is going to be harmed directly by this. And I could go on and on and on. So I'm not worried about that aspect of it.
Except for the fact that the case on the IRS rebates, you've read those decisions, and basically they said the economic harm to the state and all the rest of that is speculative and did not give you standing on that. That case that's now, I assume, working its way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Ninth Circuit shot you down, the trial judge shot you down. So what makes you think this is different?
Because of all of the other concrete harms that we describe in the litigation, and I feel confident about it. We've made similar arguments and won similar cases in other areas that I think we're going to win this one.
All right, thanks,
Okay,
everybody.
thanks everybody, appreciate it.